One of my earliest blooming perennials in May is peonies, and I used these lovely blooms for cut arrangements that I sold for Mother's Day, paired with bee balm and Nepeta. Next up, a little bit later in the season, later into May, is my yarrow. This is yarrow that is perennial for me, and I grew it from seed. And this is the second or third year that I've had this yarrow. You can see that at this stage it's just starting to bud up and the blooms are just starting to open. I love that this yarrow is just covered in pollinators and it really makes me happy waving in the wind. Next up, I have some wildflowers that I harvest from the side of the road for arrangements. I have Queen Anne's lace, ox-eye daisies, and also wild native yarrow. This verbascum started blooming probably the second or third week in May, and this is the Southern Charm mix. Some of them are more pink and purple, and then there's also some yellow verbascum as well. This kind of struggles in the wind and tends to lay down, but the blooms are still just so lovely that I like to keep them around. These daylilies put on quite a show throughout spring and summer. These have been blooming since the middle of May and they'll just continue going into the season. And as their name suggests, their blooms only last for about a day, but they're quickly replaced with other blooms from the same plant. Next to my yellow daylilies, I have some purple salvia. This is just the generic type of salvia, it's not anything special, but this blooms really nicely in late spring and then I cut it back and it reblooms in the summer as well. Pollinators love this one, but it is another one that likes to flop, especially because we've gotten such excessive rain. I think it would be doing a little bit better and would be a little bit less leggy if we hadn't gotten so much rain so far this season. It's worth mentioning that this upright sedum also blooms. I like the yellow blooms, even though I grow it just for the foliage usually. This is one that I like to use in cut arrangements, not with the blooms typically, but just the leaves, and it looks really nice and lasts a really long time in the vase. In fact, it can even grow roots if it's left too long in an arrangement. This is a Kelsey's Dwarf Red Twig Dogwood, and the blooms are really nice, and I also really like the way that the foliage has filled in this spot in my garden, as well as the red twigs in the wintertime, but I'm really on the fence about this one because of the amount of pest pressure that it has. This year, these bushes have really struggled with dogwood sawflies that the larvae or the caterpillars almost look like white bird poop curled up on the leaves. They're just tearing this to shreds. It did not fare well in the hail that we had the other day, and then it also really struggles with bagworms toward the end of the summer and closer into the fall. So I don't know if I'll keep these around. They look pretty when they're not totally eaten up, but the blooms are nice as well. I'm really impressed with this Cat's Pajamas Nepeta that is just covered in pollinators all the time, and I sowed some calendula last year. It was the Happy Days mix, I believe, from Baker Creek, and I did not anticipate that it would self-seed and come back, but it has. Sometimes calendula can come back in our area, and sometimes we get too cold for it, so I guess this season went well for the calendula, and it has spread. I have about 8 new plants that are coming up now, and I'm really enjoying this contrast between the orange and the purple of the Nepeta behind it. These are just a few of the things that I have growing and blooming in May, and I will continue to keep you updated as the season progresses and as more things are looking lovely in my garden. Thank you so much for growing along with me.